Recapping the 2025-26 January playoff games. That's what we're doing today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. Shawn, we have not talked for a few weeks. People will be excited for this to hit their air or their podcast feeds. And we had a million things that we could have talked about. We'll talk about a million things throughout the offseason. But just kind of checking back in now where we haven't talked in a few weeks, one of the things we were thinking about leading here into the Super Bowl this weekend was to kind of talk through the games. We always do the Sunday night shows throughout the regular season, talk about everything we're seeing in the games during the regular season. Fun to talk through the playoffs, but we haven't talked since literally the divisional round. And so there's a ton of stuff. We were just spitballing some ideas before, a ton of stuff that we could talk about. You mentioned to me on the AFC side how the weather was so bad. I was sharing some thoughts back with you about feeling like New England's 3 games have just been, in my opinion, not great football games. I got a lot of stuff that people, they love to tell you when you say something's not a great football game because it was low scoring. They love to tell you that you just don't know defense. You don't know good defense in those things. The Patriots won 10-7 against Jarrett Stidham in a game with, blizzard in the second half, but even the first half was terrible. The two teams didn't combine for 400 total yards. They averaged less than 200 total yards on offense, which should be like a half. But the first half was terrible. The second half was somehow worse. The Texans game prior to that, you had C.J. Stroud throwing all these picks. The Chargers game prior to that, they had no tackles and looked completely lost offensively. They do all have good defenses, which Patriots fans were quick to tell me, but I was kind of pointing out that the Patriots' run to the Super Bowl has been, it's tough relative to they got all these allegations in the regular season that they hadn't beat anyone and that it was the easiest regular season schedule and whatever, one of the 10 easiest in NFL history based on whatever metrics. And, a lot of people saying you can only beat the people in front of you. That's true. At the same time, you go into the postseason and you see the postseason lineup in a way that puts this team that we have this objectively easier regular season schedule up against Jarrett Stidham in a conference championship game. It is a little bit of a trend worth discussing. But before making the whole show about the Patriots right off the top, should bring you in. How are you doing? You've been traveling around a little bit the last couple of weeks. How's life? How are things?
Good. Had a chance to go back to Tucson for a while, enjoy the sun and warm weather there, while Kansas City was hit by a massive snowstorm that then I think stretched for like 2,000 miles, got over half the states in the country. Hopefully everyone is doing well, and the sun, wherever you are, is melting that snow. The weather also played a big role in some of these playoff games, as you mentioned. Just, certainly for Broncos fans the most, but for all of us, I think when we saw that news, wherever you were, you see that Bo Nix is out and you're thinking, this is catastrophic for the NFL because this should have been a fun game. For all of the questions and concerns that people have about both the Broncos and the Patriots, they were the 1 and 2 seeds. You have this fantastic defense with the Broncos. You have Bo Nix, especially in SIS, but certainly in a variety of different metrics or means of accounting. You have him as one of the up-and-coming young quarterbacks. The things that he's accomplished over his first 2 seasons have not been as gaudy or as flashy from a playmaking perspective as guys like Jaden Daniels and certainly Drake May this season in a near MVP caliber year. You don't have Bo Nix looking like Drake May, who I think you could argue has thrown the largest combination or the highest volume of spectacular deep passes maybe that we've ever seen, right? But Bo Nix, extremely successful over his first 2 seasons, some of the best rookie numbers in terms of wins, touchdowns, all of these things that a QB has done over those years. And then you have him against May, and suddenly you're not going to have that. You're going to have Jarrett Stidham instead. The other thing, unfortunately, is you have weather. And I don't know what the chances are of this happening. Certainly, I'm not tied in the way you and probably most of our listeners are to know like if this is being floated. But you think about the massive business that the NFL is. You think about all of these international games that come with all types of drawbacks. You think about teams like the Kansas City Chiefs going away from Arrowhead and building a dome in part so they can compete for future Super Bowls. And you think about a structure that we already have here where the number one seed gets a bye and doesn't have to play a playoff game, a huge reward. And then they have this home game in the championship. This is a long way of working around to, I think we've got to go to where the championship games in each conference are also played on neutral fields in domes or warm weather areas, because we were just all robbed of something that should have been amazing. I mean, you think about that Seahawks-Rams game, and regardless of what you think about the teams, if you're a fan of one or the other, what have you, to see the third game between the Seahawks and the Rams, to see Darnold in this kind of underdog capacity, but with an incredible team around him, almost certainly the best team in the NFL, versus an aging Matthew Stafford having an MVP season. You see that game and you contrast it with what, but it was just a pure non-game. You cannot call the AFC Championship game even a football game. And to have that in the most important moment, it ruins the season even in so many ways, right? I want to see those games played in domes on neutral fields so we can have great football in the championship game. And imagine if Drake May, instead of surviving games because we're talking about snow 2 weeks in a row where the opponent is melting down at levels that we just never see. I mean, you don't see teams that are in the post. The Houston Texans are a fantastic team. The level of meltdown that they had against the Patriots, it's just very, very unfortunate, right? And then you have that AFC Championship game. To have May and the Patriots advance that way, as opposed to May making some of the types of plays that Jaden Daniels had made the previous season to take the Commanders as far as they went, it's just really an unfortunate development for the NFL. Now, we still have this potentially fantastic Super Bowl, right? Where you have May against the Seahawks. Hopefully, whoever wins, we get that culminating event that lives up to what it should be. But I just keep going back to how unfortunate it is to, had the AFC playoffs that featured a lot of really good teams. And unfortunately, probably the two best teams in the Jaguars and the Bills playing each other right off the bat. The AFC playoffs were loaded, but they turned out to be garbage. That, I think, is a bummer.
That was definitely a big discussion. You mentioned not really being tied in. That was certainly something that got talked about a lot, thrown around. I wonder if it will pick up some traction in the offseason as they do the competition committee stuff and all of that, because there was definitely discussions about it. I think it's possible, maybe not in 2026 that, these changes will happen, but that in the next several years, we're looking at them turning the conference championships into, it's just another way for them to make more money too. Like, you can have these like sort of bowl game experiences, even more so than just the Super Bowl, and you can have other cities host them and all of these, really fun things. I think secretly you're just trying to cover for the fact that looking back at our team draft, our Super Bowl team draft that we did way back. I just pulled this up.
In good shape. Where
you took I took the Seahawks. When you said the Seahawks, probably the best team in football, it clued me to that, because it reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, I took them first, and we talked about it back then. You took the Broncos, you took the Broncos first. You had first pick. I took the Seahawks. You took the Rams. So we had 3 of the 4 as our first picks. I ended up taking the Patriots with my third pick. So I had both the Seahawks and Patriots. You had both the conference champion runner-ups. Clearly, I'm the winner of this exercise, but I think you just really wanted the Broncos to make it, is what it is from this. Well,
not really, because you don't want to have it be Broncos versus Seahawks if you don't have Bo Nix. At the same time, you did actually want to see the Patriots have to go out and win the game. They're going to have a hard time beating Jarrett Stidham if you don't have that weather. That pass play, the ruling on that, how that developed. I mean, at least make them win the game. Ben, so disappointing.
Well, and so the part of that also, you were saying we were robbed of something. I guess I would disagree because you were comparing it to the Seahawks-Rams game. The Seahawks-Rams game was always going to be a way better football game. I mean, and I don't think you were saying that they're going to be on par, but Seahawks-Rams game, we're talking about the forward-looking scheme elements. We talked about it the second time they met in the regular season, how huge that was down the stretch to see these two, contrasting, innovative offense defense matchups go at each other, and how exciting that was going to be. And they played an incredible game in Seattle. Obviously, the Rams really probably should have won that game. Seattle wins thanks to multiple 2-point conversions, including the one that was, ruled the backward pass where Zach Charbonnet picks up the ball in the end zone. They go on to win that. That goes on to give them home field advantage, which, I think were more clearly the better team in this conference championship matchup. But was certainly helpful to be playing that game in Seattle if you go all the way back to that and how close those things were, and how they maybe could have gone different directions. We did our draft right around that time, and certainly we got that matchup of the Seahawks and Rams again, and got a really good football game again in the conference championship. Meanwhile, the Broncos and Patriots, yeah, the weather was a huge deal. It was less of a deal in the first half, and they looked terrible. And then, it's two good defenses, but both offenses, you got Stidham hitting a long pass early, which helped the Broncos set up their first score. The Patriots 2 scores in that game. Their touchdown comes on the Stidham backward pass on a third down where the screen's not there and he pump fakes. And you can say a whole lot of things. He's a backup quarterback. Probably it is just one of these things where he doesn't have the reps and he doesn't have the feel for it and all of that stuff. You can't continue to try to throw the ball away that late into the down on a third down. At a certain point, you have to kill the down and take the sack because you're punting it either way. And that's especially when you're the backup quarterback and your whole responsibility in this game is don't make the costly mistake that ruins the game for you. Your defense is going to win you this game or else you're going to lose. That's the bottom line. Stidham's job is not to go win them the game. And the call is a screen. It's a giveaway down anyway. He couldn't find the ability to throw the ball away. He winds up trying to throw it away, getting his arm hit. The ball goes backward. The Patriots take over. That's where they get their only touchdown of the game. That's not to say they didn't have other opportunities and things, but their only touchdown of the game was on a drive that literally went 12 yards. And then they get a field goal. They had a couple missed field goals. Both teams had multiple missed field goals. They get a field goal later on a drive where there's the fourth down sneak that gets challenged. And I think, I think the replay was right not to overrule it because I think it's pretty tough. But I do think I think the right call would have been that he didn't make it. Because in my mind, Drake May gets stood up and there should have been forward progress called. And then sort of the defenders, there's a tush-push element, but he's held up long enough. The defenders sort of let up a little bit and he falls forward. And even when you watch that sneak on that fourth down in the third quarter that led to that field goal in that game, the guys running in, the two line judges running in from the side, which by the way were horrible all game, but they ran in from the side short of the sticks, and then they found Drake May laying in the pile beyond the sticks and they marked it beyond the sticks. And it was like, that's not how you're supposed to spot the ball. But they then were working off an assumption of a first down and then weren't able to overturn it or call forward progress on review or anything. But to my eye, watching the game, I felt like Drake May was stopped short in real time, and it was sort of just missed and then respotted based on where he wound up, which was more about just the way that the bodies fell to the ground after all the pushing stopped and the progress was really stopped. Anyway, that's a physics conversation that doesn't necessarily need to happen. And getting to the depths of that game it was the least interesting game of the entire postseason. I agree with you entirely that if it had been played in different weather, it would have been more interesting. The key point for me is less about the weather and more about Bo Nix. I think if you have Bo Nix in that game, we're forced into seeing more out of the Patriots, seeing a little bit more aggressiveness from them because we're likely to see more from the Broncos as well. Unfortunately, we just didn't get those things from either side. It was a good defensive game if you're into that sort of thing, but it was a tough game to me, more about offensive ineptitude than, defensive prowess. There was just a lot of punting. There was not a lot of aggression. And obviously the weather is a significant issue throughout. But one of the things I want to talk about, you were talking about May's body of work on the big time throws and stuff, and you were comparing it to Knicks, and you brought up Jaden Daniels. There's a fourth year 2 quarterback. Want to talk about the big time throws that we saw in this postseason. Caleb Williams was snaps away from potentially making it 4 quarterbacks from the 2024 class that made a conference championship in their first 2 years. Knicks didn't play in one, but he led a team to it. Drake May, obviously. We got Daniels last year in a conference championship, and Caleb Williams made the throw of the season to lead the Bears into overtime. I want to get your thoughts on this because you're laughing about it. I thought it was incredible. He took the snap at the 14 and threw the ball from the 40. I don't know where he was going or what he was doing. Literally from the 40, literally 26 yards of drop. I tweeted about it. I couldn't believe it when I first thought I saw him at the 40. I watched the replay multiple times. He dropped 26 yards and then threw it 5 yards deep in the end zone at an angle. It was over 50 air yards in the air on a play from the 14-yard line. You see him dropping back, and you're like, that's how this game's going to end? He's going to just take a sack back here, somehow completes a touchdown on the play. They end up losing in overtime, obviously. But a pretty incredible game from him and an incredible late season run of huge throws from him. That's a guy we should talk about as it relates to the postseason. But yeah, we've talked a lot about that 2024 QB class, which also included guys like Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy, who don't necessarily look like they're going to be revolutionary. But the first 4, or the 4 that have gone deep into the postseason here in their first 2 years, at least once, is a tremendous feat. We don't usually see young quarterbacks going that deep into the postseason. Now, Drake May is in the Super Bowl in his second year. Obviously, Jaden Daniels getting to the conference championship as a rookie. Bo Nix winning a divisional game as a rookie, not getting to play in the conference championship. And then Caleb wins a playoff game against the Packers and then very nearly led the Bears to a comeback win against the Rams. He was spectacular, I felt. There's a lot of people still talking about some of the full season body of work stuff, some of the numbers that are a little more concerning. There was a point during the season you were talking about his upward trajectory very aggressively, and I was kind of ribbing you about that. Now we're at the point where I think what's fascinating in some of the early drafts I've seen, he's going really high into next year. So there's obviously buy-in. I think there's going to be some discussion this offseason about where his full season numbers were and how they weren't actually that elite and some of that stuff. The point on Caleb that I would drive home is you don't just get better overnight. Some of the stuff that happened in his 2024 year was rough in terms of the whole offense being poorly conceived. And then you also have Eberflus and Shane Waldron as both in-season firings. And so now you don't even have the architects of the poorly conceived offense in the building. And we talked about this at the time. I was calling him like a ship without navigation, where he's just getting off the wrong path and holding the ball too long, trying to create too many plays, because you're just thinking about what are they reviewing between the 2 Sundays during the week? What are they getting into? It's tough to do when the coaches aren't even in the building anymore. They've gotten fired. You have lower staff taking over. He developed some bad habits, I think, that first year as a result of some of that. You're a young rookie playing the whole season and really without much support around you. Then you get into a system with Ben Johnson where he's developing the whole system around innovative forward thinking. We want to marry the run and pass. We want to do all these things that get you easy throws and drop you into spots that are favorable looks for a young quarterback. It isn't perfect from the beginning of the year. What I think is so fascinating about Caleb's season is the development throughout the year of year 2. And then when you look at the whole body of work, some of the numbers aren't going to be perfect. But if you're going to bet on him in fantasy or going forward, you're thinking another step forward in 2027 and beyond. We've seen that from other players who struggled early that were able to turn it around. It takes multiple years to fix everything. Josh Allen is the guy that always comes up. He first had to learn to just throw underneath a little bit because he used to just chuck it deep all the time, had the really high ADOTs. And then he wasn't very accurate for a couple of seasons, or at least 1 year with the short passing. And then he started to develop some touch in the shorter areas. It was a process for him to change the ADOT and then also throw accurately lower And then now he's a really good passer in addition to all the mobility, and it took time. Devontae Adams is a different position, but a player that comes up all the time in my thoughts on this topic, which is first couple years, terrible per route numbers and efficiency numbers with Aaron Rodgers, with the Packers. If you go look at his yards per out run, he didn't just become a 2+ yards per out run guy the next year. It scales up over multiple years. He develops the efficiency in different ways. They develop ways to use him. And then suddenly he's a peak superstar. He's at 2.5+ yards per out run every year. The profile for Caleb Williams is still really strong. The reasons that he went first overall, still really strong. And I think the progression throughout year 2 with Ben Johnson, with an actual structure around you that can help you and maybe rein in some of the weak things. Again, go back to Josh Allen. There's still concerns with Josh Allen needing to be reined in certain ways. That play right before half against the Broncos, obviously rough, right? Obviously ends up turning the ball over and leading to a Broncos field goal that, I mean, you can't say was the deciding element of the game just because they lost by 3 later, but that's a huge 3 points in a game that ends up being a close game. Maybe they should have just kneeled on it. Maybe, he needed a coach that was a little bit more aware of his proclivities to try to make plays in these situations where there was very unlikely for the Bills to even get a field goal on their own side. They didn't have any timeouts.
His defense, the Bills have put so many handcuffs on that offense that if Josh Allen doesn't make plays, they're not going to score. And so we've got a ton of thoughts on the coaches. We're going to do a show on that. We don't really want to get into Joe Brady and how undermining it is for your entire organization to fire a coach and promote someone on the staff who was arguably doing a terrible job. But
I'm glad to see we haven't talked about that. I'm glad to see that we agree on the Bills. We'll talk about the coaches more, but I've shared most of my my Bills thoughts on social, but people who have seen any of my social media posts on it will know that I completely agree with the Bills process this offseason does not speak favorably about where they're headed. Anyway, what were we going to say?
Well, I thought you were talking about Caleb Williams. You're talking about Bo Nix. You're talking about Jaden Daniels. You're talking about Drake May and how good they were across their first 2 years. I thought that was leading into a final comment about, and I kind of interrupted you, so maybe it was, like, just imagine what Tyler Shough is going to do next season.
I told Sean that I tweeted about Tyler Shough the other day. I don't think I've ever really had a tweet go as, or at least recently. I guess I've probably not viral, but anyway, it has a.
Do you get massively ratioed? Is that what they call it?
No, I mean it has 1,500 likes and then it has 200 comments on it. That's a lot of comments. It's got like 500,000 impressions. There was an ESPN article where they redrafted the 2025 NFL draft and they decided to take Tyler Shough second overall, right behind Cam Ward. My post here was the Shough hype is crazy to me. I was defending him at first. As you know, I was talking about how he could actually be somewhat positive for the Saints offense into the offseason. It's why I was on Chris Olave a decent amount. And we ended up with Juwan Johnson on a bunch of our teams. And those guys were useful for fantasy in part because of Shough. I think he played fine. I wrote the Saints scored more than 20 points in just 3 of his 9 starts against the Bucs, Jets, and Titans. Kellen Moore helped, protected him with the run, designed good pass concepts. Guy is 26. You're not taking him over Dart. Dart's 4 years younger. One of the main points I say, Saints fans, this broke contained into Saints Twitter. And one of the funny things about all these comments and everything is I have my stuff on Twitter set up to be, so on the mentions, you can set it up where you only see like comments from people that actually follow you, which is like what most people do that have a lot of followers like I do. Or a decent amount, whatever. I didn't realize how like big this was getting until I started to get comments that were on other comments that I hadn't seen. And then I clicked on a comment that went into my mentions. And I went and looked and I'm like, okay, there's 100 comments here. None of them follow me. None of these people. And they're all just like telling me I'm the dumbest person alive. Apparently in Saints Twitter, there's been a big discussion about Shough versus Dart. I didn't realize this, but that got referenced a couple times that all these people that, keep making this argument about Dart over Shough. Apparently there's been a Dart versus Shough conversation. Now, Dart is interesting because Well, a lot of people are really mad at me for saying that the Saints protected Shuck with the run because they kept telling me that the running game was bad for the Saints and that I obviously didn't watch the games and I don't know the players. I got told I don't watch the games 35 times, Sean. So that wasn't news to me. But Tyler Shuck, the protecting with the run thing was a point that even though the run game was really bad, their pass rate over expected all the way up until just the final few weeks was significantly to the negative every week. If you did actually watch the games, that's where my take came from. And writing about the games was stealing signals every week. What you saw was Shuck playing kind of decently and Kellen Moore still running the ball way more than he should have been if he actually trusted this quarterback to take the reins and really build on these things. It was frankly suboptimal for them to be running the ball as much as they were, but they were really trying to just win games with Shuck as opposed to let Shuck win games for them. And I think, for the record, for any Saints fans listening to this who may have seen this and are mad at me, I think Kellen Moore is one of the best young coaches in the league. And when I wrote about the coaches recently, and I talked about Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen and the guys that we all talk about as having a great first year, I include Kellen Moore in that conversation every time. Go read my articles about it. I continue to add Kellen Moore's name in that group. And with Mike McDonald and what he did in his second year of coaching, I think Kellen Moore's right with those guys because he was able to have a pretty strong season with Tyler Shuck. Anyway, I don't think you were trying to get us off into a huge tangent on Tyler Shuck, but the guy is 26 comment got hammered a lot too. And people are, 26 old now. No, 26 means it's not an apples to apples comparison. And if you're doing this exercise that ESPN did and redrafting, you need to have seen more out of Tyler Shuck because every piece of data we've ever seen suggests age adjusting production and understanding that what Jackson Dart did at 20. So everyone was sending me stats about the full season and that Shuck's numbers in certain ways looked better than Dart's for this year. It's not apples to apples when there's a 4-year difference in their actual age in terms of what you would expect the development to be from here. You have to look. And then Jackson Dart's a separate conversation. People are like, what, do you think the Giants didn't run the ball a lot? No, they ran the ball a ton. They were doing the same thing. I totally get it. Their coach got fired. It's the same thing I was just talking about with Caleb Williams in my mind, where the guy who designed the offense is now no longer in the building. They lose Malik Neighbors mid-season. They got Mike Kafka taken over, and he is calling very run-heavy games, but for different reasons. Because he's trying to audition for whatever other roles, and he's trying to win games. What Mike Kafka is doing and what Wan'Dale Robinson can do for you as a number one wide receiver is very different than what Kellen Moore was doing for Tyler Shuck and what Chris Olave can do for you. There's a bunch of people telling me that the Saints have no good players around him. I understand the Saints roster is not great, but when they're also telling me that Jackson Dart was in a great position, I don't understand how having Chris Olave isn't preferred to what the Giants had. But anyway, that's enough for Tyler Shuck.
You're looking at adjusted net yards per attempt, same for the two guys. Higher touchdown percentage, lower interception percentage. For Dart, QB ratings basically identical. SIS does have a decent margin between Shuck and Dart in IQR, which adjusts for some of the teammate things. Same target depth. The pressure percentage higher? For Shuck.
Is Shuck higher? Shuck, yeah.
Pressure
Shuck played fine. Shuck played fine. I mean, I'm not but you wouldn't, in a redraft, you wouldn't take the 26-year-old who played fine over the 22-year-old who showed. Our buddy Scott Barrett was comparing him to Patrick Mahomes after 3 starts. He was saying he's the best young quarterback since Patrick Mahomes. Then Daboll gets fired not long after, and Dart's season does unravel a little bit. And apparently that's not anyway.
So the fact that they have comparable stats for their rookie seasons means that they're not comparable players, to your point. I think the more interesting argument and discussion is actually Shook versus Cam Ward, where you could make the case that Shook played well enough and Ward played poorly enough that you might actually flip that one. Certainly, I think you would have to take Jackson Dart first. We look at these playoff games. We look at these young QBs that you were talking about. And for me, I think there are sort of interesting pieces for all three of them that go back to these playoff games, but also are even broader than that. We think about these teams, and obviously the Rams also belong in there, maybe the best team in football, but you look at these 4 teams with the Bears, the Seahawks, the Broncos, and the Patriots. And you have 2 teams in the Seahawks and Patriots who don't drop any passes. And you have 2 teams in the Bears and the Broncos that drop a ton of passes. The most obvious highlight play from the playoffs is that Kayshon Boutte catch, which again is just, sensational. But the plays that probably stand out in terms of being equally or more important are the performances from the Broncos and the Bears receivers that Nix and Williams are having to overcome. You look at that game, and the Bears-Rams game was the most heartbreaking one for me, because I had definitely gone out and said, the Bears are going to win this game. Certainly, I think, going to overtime, felt good about that. Once you get into overtime, these teams have been proven, at least for that particular game, to be fairly even. You have Rome Odunze not make the catch early on. You have an interception a few plays later. If Odunze catches that ball, the Bears go on to win that game. There's just absolutely no doubt in my mind. The interesting thing, too, is just like this. It's not that there's a little bit of a contrast, but the ultra aggressiveness, perhaps. There's basically no level of aggressiveness that I can't get behind, but the perhaps over the top aggressiveness from Ben Johnson in that game contrasted with the just ultra crazy conservatism that we have seen from the Patriots really during the season, but then flowing into the playoffs, where they now have this stretch where they're playing great defenses, atrocious offenses, and they made the calculation. We think that if you just let those teams lose, they will beat themselves, which that's the part I think that's the most disappointing. Again, you have weather in two of the games that makes it a pretty good fit with the way that they went about it. But for Drake May to continue to take so many sacks in a situation where the Sports Info Solutions numbers would suggest that, the Patriots offensive line is fantastic. It's not fantastic, but it's also not catastrophic, certainly in a way that like the Chargers situation is. That this is a problem for him, right? You have that offset with some of the scramble elements in that game. But the Broncos frankly dominated that first half, which I think if you're the Patriots, the snow is coming. Or perhaps you don't know it's coming to that extent. It was crazy the way that snowstorm rolled in, right? But you cannot let yourself be completely dominated in the first half. You have the quick possession by the Broncos to start. Then you have the long touchdown drive. You also have a drive in there where they're in great shape, and Cortland Sutton does not come down with a pass you have to catch to keep a drive alive. And then the subsequent drive, you have them going for it on fourth down when they probably shouldn't have, right? So you have those three drives together in that first half time period where the Broncos are not allowing the Patriots to even pick up first downs. This was a dominating first half by a Broncos team that didn't have their QB.
It was clear at halftime they had to have done more to that point to maximize how the degree to which they had outperformed. They had not scored enough to put on the scoreboard what the game had looked like to that point. You have, when you're playing with Jarrett Stidham, you have to do more to that point.
And so, again, the calculation worked. And I think that the Patriots can say, look, this idea that we've had throughout the season that, like, if we arrive early, that's fine. That's great. You think back to the way Bill Belichick described the first Super Bowl victory with Tom Brady and company, where he's like, we won a Super Bowl with this team. The Patriots may be in that same situation a little more than 20 years later, where Vrabel is like, we won a Super Bowl with this team. The fact that it worked out, my question for you is, was it the right way to do it? Is it something that they can sustain? Because we continue to see them not really give opportunities to the only receivers they have who can separate. When I give Drake May a hard time for taking all of these sacks and looking like he has no clue what's happening in the pocket unless a massive hole opens right in front of him, that has to be balanced with the fact that the Patriots are not giving him people to throw the ball to. Right. So you're talking about, well, the Bears, they drop all of these passes. They can't catch it all, but they've given Caleb Williams people who can get open. Right. The Patriots have not done that for Drake May. And so you put that context in with all of these amazing deep throws. I think that's one of the reasons that football is so fascinating, so fun, right? Is that we have all of these contrasts where you cannot compare apples to apples. And so your comparisons have to be more nuanced in a way that can easily still just be wrong. The thing with the Broncos that was so interesting is that, you don't have Bo Nix in the AFC Championship game. But you think about the Broncos for the full season and some of the underwhelming things that they did on offense. And you go to the fact that, I mean, Troy Franklin was the most involved receiver from an air yards perspective by a huge margin, to the point where he was one of the higher receivers in the entire NFL from that perspective through their bye. And they make the evaluation both then and in the playoffs that Troy Franklin is so bad that we are going to play journeyman and similar to the calculation really that the Patriots have made, where they're like, we're just going to play random dudes who can't get open, and we're just hoping that they block in the run game and don't make catastrophic mistakes. The contrast between that and what you have with the Bears, even to the point of that sensational play at the end, the contrast between that and what the Seahawks have with Jackson Smith and Jigba, it just creates a lot of layers, and it creates a situation where when we're trying to evaluate a Sam Darnold or trying to evaluate these young QBs, certainly Jaden Daniels didn't stay healthy, but was also put in a horrible situation in 2025. And now things that have transpired in the hiring cycle probably don't bode particularly well for him going forward. They don't bode particularly well for Jackson Dart going forward as we look at that Shook versus Dart conversation. I mean, it may be a case where a year from now it's very clear cut Shook just because of context, just because of context.
Yeah. The Shook Dart thing. The other thing I was thinking that I didn't mention in my rant was, at this point you also have to layer in so much context from their college, and Shook playing 7 years, and really the most extensive college that he played was when he was 25, right? Like, again, age-adjusted stuff. Yeah, he had a lot of injuries earlier on and stuff, but like Jackson Dart had the more impressive collegiate statistical profile at a much younger age as well. But then, I mean, that's, again, why I think you look at their first year, you don't just look at 9 starts for Shook, and I think it was 12 for Dart, and say, oh, well, Shook's IQR was a little bit better, like you were saying. Like, yeah, we can make that comparison, but there's other context, was the point of my tweet. Anyway, we don't want to talk about that some more. I've also made Patriots fans really angry, and I made them angry because of this conversation about how poor the Patriots games were, which, again, people like to say that I don't understand football, which I mean, part of the reason I get so tilted about constantly being told I don't watch the games is I'm certain that 99.9% of the people saying it don't watch as much football as I do. I literally watch every single game. Like, you spend every Sunday watching every single snap of every single game, and then come talk to me. I could be wrong. That's fine. You can tell me I'm wrong, but don't tell me that I'm not putting in the work of watching the freaking games. Like, it's like bad for my health how much football I watch. The Patriots fans, we did this with the Vikings a few years ago, Sean, where I upset Vikings fans because I was saying they were so fortunate, and they were like, that year they were 14-3, and they ended up losing in the first round to the Giants. And everyone was saying they were a fraudulent 14-3. And Vikings fans were rightfully annoyed at this fraudulent word. No one likes to hear that. It's the same word that's getting thrown around with the Patriots, and it's why Patriots fans are getting defensive. It's not fraudulent. They already can feel that people are going to say that their Super Bowl is fraudulent. You made that comment that we may be looking back on this team and saying they won a Super Bowl. How? It doesn't matter. No one takes away the fact that you won a Super Bowl. The thing I was saying to Vikings at that time was, there are so many seasons. Bills fans would love some luck. There are so many seasons where teams have good teams and cannot get any breaks. And you end the season going, our team could have just won if we got a couple of breaks or if a couple things went differently. I just did this with the Seattle Mariners in the baseball season. I think if they would have managed their bullpen differently, they could have won. They just got unfortunate, couple, bad decisions with pitchers and bad pitches left out over the plate and what have you, or else they could have won. And then the Dodgers didn't play this overwhelmingly dominant World Series. So obviously the Mariners could have won the World Series. The Dodgers proved they were beatable in the World Series. You can do, every team that loses does.
You want to come off of the back of these other problems and antagonize Dodgers fans? Yeah,
now I want to antagonize Dodgers fans too. Patriots fans don't know what it's like to lose. This is the problem. But let me tell you, as fans who have not won so many Super Bowls or championships in all other sports, there are and then Vikings fans actually do know what it's like to lose. And I know because I grew up a freaking Vikings fan. But my message to Vikings fans when I was young was, when I was young. I grew up, I was a Vikings fan when I was young. My message to Vikings fans in 2022, I think was the year, was you should just be grateful. There's nothing wrong with admitting that your team got fortunate, that it's probably not quite as good as a 14-3 record assumes, but that you have a 14-3 record. No one can take that away from you. You're going to get, at the time, it looked like they may get a bye. They ended up not getting a bye that year. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong year. I can't remember. Regardless, they end up losing because that was the year they won their division. So they maybe had the 2 seed and the Giants were the 7 seed, whatever. I'm conflating it in my head right now with the year where they lost, just last year, 2024, where they lost in week 18 to the Lions and obviously got the top wild card. They didn't win the division. They also were a 14-win team that year. I think that the fraudulent year was the 2022 year. The year last year with Sam Darnold, not considered fraudulent by a lot of the advanced stats, and that wasn't a narrative for their season last year. At any rate, my point was, okay, people are saying your team's not as good as a 14-3 season a record indicates. They're not saying you're bad. They probably, if you were 10-7 or whatever, would think that was great, or 11-6 or something. It's just the fact that you've won, you've gotten lucky, that then leads to this conversation, and lucky in air quotes. But the same thing is true, I believe, of the Patriots, where it's not a bad thing that you're in the Super Bowl. Like, it's not a bad thing that you got a fortunate thing laid out for you in the AFC playoffs, where you didn't have to go through Buffalo or Jacksonville, as you said, were two of the teams that seemed really, really dangerous coming in, and they beat each other up. And then the Broncos beat Buffalo, and then the Broncos lose Knicks. And so you go through the Chargers, Texans, and Knicks-less Broncos. That's fortunate in a way that I have been rooting for all of my teams my entire life, that the bracket would break that way. Every bracket I've ever looked at in season, I'm like, who's my team going to play in the first round? I hope it's this crappy team. I hope everything breaks right for my team to overperform what it actually is. And then when it happens, you get fans that get so mad at you for saying they probably have run good. And now, by the way, Sean, like, I'm not trying to take it away from the Patriots. You already said they're going to look back on, this team won a Super Bowl. Nicky Manwari just got injured today. We're recording the day that he got hurt in practice. He is the linchpin of the Seahawks defense. He's the reason they can stay in nickel against the heavy tight end formations that have forced teams out of nickel into base, forced these defenses to regulate more so that teams can go attack them. It's the whole reason for the 13 personnel fad and all that stuff. The Patriots undoubtedly want to run multiple tight end formations, maybe not 13, but they run some stuff with Henry and Austin Hooper on the field together. Undoubtedly going to do some 12 personnel. The Seahawks undoubtedly would like to have a healthy Nick Manwari. He's now injured. And also, I was already going to tell you that if you win the Super Bowl, you beat Sam Darnold. Good luck. Who cares? I mean, Sam Darnold could have a meltdown game, and suddenly all this stuff about Sam Darnold, everyone is glowing over Sam Darnold. To me, he's the 5th most interesting Seahawks storyline. I mean, he's done well. He quieted doubters with a great NFC championship. There's so much there with McDonald and Kubiak and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and the defense that is way more interesting to me. I don't think there's a better quarterback situation in the league right now, and possibly for many, many years, than the one Darnold's in. A lot of people want to say the Vikings are so stupid for letting him walk. I think if the Vikings didn't let him walk, the Vikings wouldn't be in the Super Bowl, and the Seahawks still might because of all of the other factors. But regardless,
perhaps the Vikings were awfully good outside of the QB position. Again, you keep going back to this idea of J.J. McCarthy, and when I say you, I mean the global NFL thought. And I mean, he was so much worse than Zach Wilson that we have no ability to really evaluate this Vikings team. But I want to drill down on this point with the Patriots, right? Which is not so much that they had these 3 easy playoff games because of the opposing offense's meltdowns and the weather, but that came on the heels of, as you mentioned, what is generally considered to be the 10th easiest regular season schedule since the merger. And so the question with all of these just amazing Drake May passes all year long was how much of it is that Drake May is the next guy, right? How much of it is that he's going to take over from Patrick Mahomes and he's going to be the NFL, and how much of it was schedule? Well, then you flip to where it's the extreme opposite end, where he's playing these 3 very good defenses, and in cases where the weather is bad and you don't need to do anything on offense, or it worked out that way, right? But he was awful. And so how much of it does that then neutralize what he did during the regular season and suggest that his play really was the result of an easy schedule? How much are these two things completely unrelated? How smart was it all year long for Vrabel and company to take a very conservative approach? Because the argument all along is that you're not developing your team for the future. You're not developing it for 2026, where maybe you actually would be the favorite. And if you make a good run this season, you're not going to have those key pieces ready for the playoffs. But then it turned out an even more conservative approach to the playoffs was the way to get there. And now they're there. How do those pieces interact? If we don't have the super easy regular season schedule, I don't think people are up in arms about what's happened in the playoffs. There's like sometimes that happens. And it was smart for the Patriots to play good defense and win those games.
It's a super interesting line of discussion. And that's what's so interesting to me about when I was talking about the Patriots having an easy path in the playoffs. And I got the same talking point from every Patriots fan, which was they played against 3 of the top 5 defenses. And that's their counter right now in New England. I mean, you get like the Tyler Shuck thing, I get the same freaking reply over and over and over again. It's like, all right, you guys are all reading the same blog for your team and you're all getting the same one talking point. And then you're telling me I don't watch the games or think critically. I mean, let's think a little bit outside the box. But the point about the Patriots thing that drives me so nuts about the 3 defenses and 5 of the top 5 defenses, and no team had ever done that, apparently. First of all, there's a ton of different defensive stats. Which one are we talking about? Who cares? The second thing is how many teams have even had a schedule in the postseason where they played 3 consecutive defenses in the top 5 like that. It's got to be extremely rare. Third thing, how many, and I would suggest almost certainly 0, have done that and had the opposing offenses be as bad as they were. There is context to this stat. There's more to it. Yes, they beat 3 good defenses, but the real key point here is their offense wasn't even good. You're not telling me that they beat good defenses by playing good offense against them. If they beat good defenses that had teams that were actually playing good offense back against the Patriots, and I'm not saying the Patriots didn't play good D, they did. But if the other team is putting up points on you and you have to go beat a good defense by scoring, that's different. Now you can tell me they beat 3 good defenses because they did stuff on offense. I don't care that they played 3 good defenses if what you just described is what happened, that they played even more conservatively through the playoffs, and it was right to do so. But don't tell me your counter argument is that they had to beat a bunch of good defenses when they didn't need offense to do it. They didn't actually have to go beat that strength. It wasn't strength on strength. Drake May in the conference championship completed 10 passes for 86 yards, took 5 sacks. And the Patriots won that game largely because they didn't have any turnovers. If you go look at their first 2 games, they had 5 combined turnovers. They win in part because the Texans have 5 on their own in the game where the Patriots had 3. There's 8 turnovers in that game. And then the Chargers offense was a complete shell in that game. And you do give the Patriots defense credit for that. But there's like you said, the Patriots offense has not necessarily looked great. And that conference, I think the questions you were asking me are the real questions. They're going to be interesting. It's fun for Patriots fans. If I'm a Patriots fan, it's fun that we get to play for a Super Bowl despite our team having some glaring flaws. That's a positive. Yes, that's great. Despite the fact that we put up 208 net passing yards combined over the last 2 weeks, which I had a Patriots fan tell me, Sean, that no quarterback in NFL history would have put up more offense because of the weather than I think both teams in the last 2 games, the Texans game and the Broncos game. And I'm like, man, how long have you been a Patriots fan for? Because you had the greatest quarterback of all time in cold weather games, like in the last generation. What are we talking about? Acting like we can't criticize within context. Yes, there was bad weather.
They put up like 50 in the snow against the Cardinals in a season where the Cardinals then like a month later went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there was bad weather. Yes, we can make caveats. Yes, we can talk about how good the defenses were. You can still evaluate what happened while controlling for variables, right? That's what we have to do with football constantly. There are a million things that affect every play. All the stats that we have, people love to talk about EPA and stuff. All of those have holes where they miss important context. It's the reality of everything that impacts this sport. It drives me nuts when people, say things like you don't watch the games or whatever, and they're not controlling for the context themselves. Like, you can't simplify things down to one stat or one thing. And when we do try to paint this broader picture, it's not meant to discredit the Patriots or anything like that. But as far as where we go from here, I think Drake May, look, my big answer is this guy was the youngest quarterback in his class last year. He's still only 22 years old. And what he's done to this point, despite probably not being as great as some of the raw stuff would say, because we have to control for some of the I guess he's 23 at this point. Sorry. He turned 23 last August even. So I'm way behind on that, but he was 21 when he was drafted. And then I was thinking, did he play as an age 21 rookie? He did not. He was age 22 rookie, age 23, second year. He's going to be 24 going into next season, freshly minted 24. My point is, even if his production is not quite on the level of, or the way that we should evaluate his production and the development of it and how conservative they were, and some of the things you just said, not quite on the level of what the actual results were from a win-loss perspective, that I do think you still have to be incredibly optimistic about the traits, about the downfield passing, about the scramble ability, the mobility, how it all comes together, playing within yourself at this age as it relates to what the next steps are, right? Like, that's what I was kind of talking about with Caleb Williams as well. We're never expecting things to be stagnant in the NFL. How much change is there going to be, and what direction is it going to go? What we've seen from Drake May, to me, suggests change positively going forward. Meanwhile, we talked about Sam Darnold. One of the things that I think people are having such a hard time with Sam Darnold is the Occam's razor thing of, hey, this guy won more games in 2 years than I think any quarterback ever, because he won all those games with the Vikings last year. And then first quarterback, I think, to have back-to-back 14-win seasons, they were saying, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it's first since Tom Brady. I can't remember the exact stat. The Occam's razor, which refers to this concept of the thing with the simplest explanations is usually accurate, is that Sam Darnold's a good quarterback because he won all these games. I think this is a scenario where Occam's razor is too simple, where we actually need to identify. And I love what you said about JJ McCarthy was so bad, because one of the hard things about this explanation is, how come the Vikings got so much worse? Well, part of the explanation is JJ McCarthy is terrible, is worse than Zach Wilson, as you put it, which is glowingly bad. If Sam Darnold had an incredible situation last year, because Kevin O'Connell is still a good coach, and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson is still a good surrounding cast, and he had an incredible situation, even better one this year, because that defense is insane. Mike McDonald is the best young coach in football. Clint Kubiak's going to get a head coaching job, and rightfully so, because he did an incredible job coordinating. And you had Jackson Smith and Jigba, who once especially unlocked by Kubiak instead of running flat routes with Shane Waldron 2 years ago, was asked to do things that put him in the best position for his skill set to succeed. We saw his ceiling completely take off. Then Sam Darnold's once again in an incredible situation. It doesn't mean Sam Darnold's played bad football. That's not what I'm saying. But you can contextualize things. And in the case of Darnold, for me, it's not an Occam's razor thing. The answer is, he was in a great situation, one of the best ones in the league 1 year. Then he changed teams, and he was in another great situation for quarterback play, the best in the league, the next year. And as we go forward, I think what we're going to see in 2027, 2028, 2029 down the line, depending, I mean, I think the situation is going to be favorable again next year with Seattle, but depending where he plays and what happens, I think that's going to be vindicated. I think we're not going to look back on Sam Darnold and say he became Tom Brady or whatever it was. We're going to say, yeah, I mean, he played for some great teams for a couple years, floor-raising teams that can elevate and you can win despite a quarterback with flaws. One of my favorite Sam Darnold stats I saw was he had the most giveaways in the league this year. He's the first quarterback since 2007 to make the Super Bowl in the same season where he had the most regular season giveaways. The guy in 2007 who did it was Eli Manning. I think Eli Manning's a perfect comparison for Sam Darnold. Like everything you think about Eli Manning, which includes that he's not as good as his brother. He's not like, we don't have to act like because he won 28 regular season games in 2 years, that Sam Darnold is one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. He's just not. And yet we can still say he did answer some bells. He didn't have a massive rate of giveaways in the postseason. One of the big things was, can he win big games? He was able to not turn the ball over in that NFC Championship game, and some of those big things that helped them win and still make positive plays, not just play conservatively like the Patriots were doing. So anyway, you have to contextualize these things. You have to think about going forward, what it all is going to mean, not just in this moment, not just what the stats say from this year, which is, we know a small sample size. And we know the NFL is always a moving target. You always have to be willing to contemplate what I always like to talk about when people use the R square models is the unexplained variance. And that's why there's no models that have R squared that are super, super high in football. There's always unexplained variance from whatever direction you're looking at the problem. You need to look at it from 6 different directions and then be like, yeah, this is, what happened. And anyway, in the case of Drake May, when I look at it, that was a question you would ask me. When I look at that one from a lot of different directions, I still say, look, he's been really good at a really young age.
So we've talked a lot about the Patriots and some of the things that they have struggled with and or had an easy path on are so obvious that they get talked about a lot. I want to bring one up that, again, probably is being discussed, but I do think is maybe quietly the main storyline of the Super Bowl. And it goes right back to that Sam Darnold point you were making, which is that they have faced the 49ers and the Rams. And they faced the 49ers a couple times in a row there because they played the game actually for the number 1 seed where they defeated the 49ers as well. The 49ers and the Rams, probably both of those teams are better than any teams that the Patriots played in the postseason. If not for how many times those teams had to play each other, we would be looking at them in a little bit different light, maybe an all-time great type of light. However, it is true that the strength of the 49ers and the strength of the Rams is on the offensive side. It's with the genius of their play callers. Certainly the Rams had Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua this season. People tend to know the 49ers defense and the 49ers passing defense was awful, right? Didn't create a lot of pressure. The numbers that Blair has for his advanced matchup tool going into the playoffs has them with the most separation allowed in the entire NFL. Certainly that's going to be tough for corralling someone like Jackson Smith and Jigba. You look at the Rams, who have a little bit different sort of reputation defensively, but also had been very poor down the stretch in pass defense, a team that doesn't create a lot of pressure and that is better at limiting separation, but give up a ton of yards after the catch. Again, that's going to be tough if you want to corral JSN. And so it's almost certainly the case, especially when you're playing these games at home, that while the path overall was difficult for the Seahawks to make the Super Bowl, they only have to play the 2 games because they're the top seed, and they have 2 matchups that there's going to be scoreboard pressure, which that turned out to be the case against the Rams, not at all against the 49ers, who they annihilated. Scoreboard pressure, and we saw Darnold melt down in the 2 games against the Rams during the regular season, winning one of them. But actually a home game against the Rams in the NFC Championship game is a pretty nice matchup for your quarterback. The Patriots defense is, again, hard to evaluate, like everything about the Patriots happens to be. But there's a strong possibility that what Darnold faces in the Super Bowl from New England will give him a lot more trouble than what he has faced recently. And that these issues that we have, you talked about it yourself, when you're like, now in the Super Bowl, all you have to do is beat Sam Darnold. That the way he's played, which Sam Darnold has a lot of big strengths. And I think if you're going to choose a QB and you don't have access to the superstars, you would choose a quarterback who has some of the strengths that Sam Darnold has. The person who's able to throw these immaculate deep passes to a JSN when JSN's route running and the scheme has opened him up to do that. You need the guy who can trigger that pass. And they made a beautiful choice in Darnold for that. And he's made the plays. My argument would be that we don't have definitive information that Sam Darnold can actually make those plays against an upper echelon defense in a big game.
I think that's an interesting way to frame that essentially the Niners and the Rams were an easier schedule of defenses than the current market is looking at. I'm inclined to agree, because I'm inclined to believe that the entire football landscape for these last 2 weeks has been giving Darnold way too much credit. Like I said, I think earlier I said he's like the 5th most interesting Seattle storyline to me. It's great to see that he was able to have some really big, stats and have some big games and not see ghosts like he, pretty clearly did 12 months ago. I mean, part of that was, 12 months ago, Sam Darnold looked horrendous in that loss to the Lions in week 18 that they needed to win to try to get a bye. Both teams were trying very hard. And then the next week they played a playoff game and he looked horrendous again and they lost in the first round of the playoffs. There's been a lot that's happened in the last couple of weeks. The Vikings fired Kwesi, and basically there's been stuff coming out that like maybe Kevin O'Connell didn't really want to get rid of Darnold and JJ McCarthy was sort of forced upon him and all of these things. And there's then people responding to that's, Kevin O'Connell's camp that's winning a power struggle. And they're obviously going a different direction in terms of the team building. And a lot of that is, hey, you guys let Sam Darnold go, your quarterback, and he's playing in the Super Bowl now. And I just don't think that's relevant. Like I was saying a minute ago. So I'm inclined to agree with you. I just said a minute ago that if the Vikings still had Sam Darnold, they wouldn't be in the Super Bowl, and the Seahawks maybe still would be without Sam Darnold. And that's certainly an oversimplification, but I think that's closer to the truth than people realize. I don't think the Seahawks necessarily could have done it with Geno, for example. Like I think Darnold has brought them a quarterback who plays within the structure of their offense and the scheme that they wanted to build. And that was one of the reasons they went and got him. They talked about that, was that he had some success in the McShanahan, schemes, and they had gone out and hired Clint Kubiak and they wanted to go that way. They also went out and signed Cooper Kupp to a massive amount of money, which apparently has done some good things for their scheme. I don't know where the production is necessarily justified. This is part of the reason I was down on the Seahawks offseason, was that those moves. I thought they were trying to fit talent to scheme instead of scheme to talent. They went out and brought in Marcus Valdes-Scantling, who they ended up cutting because he had played under Clint Kubiak in New Orleans at the end of last season, and there was some familiarity with the scheme there. And yet the broader decision of where the direction they wanted to go in scheme-wise is real. So John Schneider ends up winning Executive of the Year. Mike McDonald is apparently not going to win Coach of the Year. I don't understand it. I mean, Schneider... For a long time, John Schneider was drafting non-consensus first-round picks in the first round, and then they would fail. He was I-know-bettering the entire market, and then they would not succeed. He has a long track record. He made a lot of really good draft picks more recently. I've given a lot of that credit back to guys like Mike McDonald. I do think some of those picks were made to fit schemes that Pete Carroll was running, and I think when you look at like the Nick Emanwari pick in the second round, that was probably with input from Mike McDonald, that we want this flexible, versatile safety so we can run a defensive scheme where even when we face bigger formations, we can stay in nickel, which the Seahawks did over 80% of the time, the highest rate in the league by far. And it was one of the big reasons their defense was able to adjust to this evolving schematic landscape in 2025 and be at the forefront of it. And all that goes back to Mike McDonald feuding with Ryan Grubb in their first season together, and making it known that he didn't like the way Ryan Grubb was directing the offense, and then firing him after 1 year. And I called that risky in the offseason because I liked Mike McDonald for the Seahawks. But I thought, look, you go to your second offensive coordinator, you can't fire him after 1 year as well. No one's going to want to work for you. And you might be shortening your leash where, after a couple years, if you're failing, you fire and you go out, you hire a new coordinator, or you bring in a new quarterback or something. You say, well, the first quarterback coordinator, whatever, didn't work. Now I'm going a different direction. You give yourself a couple more years, give yourself a 4-year leash. Maybe by firing a coordinator after 1 year, you've only given yourself a 3-year leash or something to that effect. None of that mattered because Mike McDonald had a handle on all of it. And one of the things I did say is the only way I thought Seattle would actually be good this year is if their defense was the leading element of it. Still, I was wrong on Darnold and their offense and all of those elements, but I didn't see that Mike McDonald was so, I think, forward-looking and realizing, look, I can't win in the modern NFL from a schematic perspective with what Ryan Grubb is doing and what he's trying to do and what he's not understanding that I'm talking to him about during the week we need to do, and then he's calling on Sundays when he's calling my offense. I got to go a different direction. He ends up bringing in Kubiak. It's obviously a home run. This idea that he was shortening his leash is laughable at this point. He's in the Super Bowl. He may be a Super Bowl winning head coach while by the time some people are listening to this. He's going to lose Kubiak now because that guy's going to go get a head coaching job after 1 year as his coordinator, and he's going to be on his third coordinator in 3 years. But I do think he'll go make another hire, and he and Schneider together will go make another hire that will put them in the right position, again, schematically, understanding the X's and O's, being at the forefront of it. And so I'm not trying to necessarily criticize John Schneider. I think he made a lot of good picks, and he's made a lot better picks in the last several years. He's been getting a lot of credit as well recently. My point is just that we see the ebbs and flows with people who are labeled good drafters, they also have down stretches, and he actually had a really pretty poor stretch in there where he was missing on basically every early pick that he was taking. And then more recently, they've been hitting on a lot of stuff, and he has done well even since before McDonald, because it's like 4 years of pretty good draft results for them now. I think Schneider, whatever, but to me, McDonald should be the clear coach of the year because of, look, he's at the forefront of all the scheme stuff. He's the guy that everyone's going to be copying this offseason. I think that the reason they went the direction they did offensively had a lot to do with, goes back to what the conversations that were being leaked and were made public during the 2024 Seahawks season, where McDonald and Grubb were not on great terms. That wasn't Schneider. That was McDonald in real time coaching the team, saying, I can't coach with this coordinator. I got to go a different direction. And then decisions like the Nick Emmanwori pick, which unlocked the defense, was a scheme fit. I have to imagine McDonald had a lot to say and do with that. And then they go out and they win 14 games and they beat their win total over under, which was lower than the Patriots. We've talked about this on the show, but anyway, to me, I think, I'm not even sure where I was going with that whole thing, but the whole idea that Schneider is like the driving force behind this build is it's not wrong, but it's fascinating. At any rate, we have Sam Darnold. You were asking me about Sam Darnold playing against some easier defenses. We're going to find out, because the Patriots defense is good.
I think one of the most fun things about the Super Bowl is how much in the last several weeks is that it's bringing us into a modern NFL. It's bringing us into the future. And you were talking about before the show with me how flat the Super Bowl odds are for the next season. I don't think that we're going to have a result in the Super Bowl, even if we get a blowout. I don't think we're going to have one like last year with Kansas City, where really the takeaway from that is like maybe it's over for Kansas City and we'll see who rises up. The Patriots are going to be better in 2026, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with this Vrabel-May connection for a long time. The Seahawks will probably be better in 2026. I think the Denver Broncos will be better in 2026. Both on the AFC side, you're going to see both New England and Denver add pieces for their young QBs to make things easier on them. Right. You're going to get some more receiver firepower, and that will allow those offenses to evolve and to hold up their end of it in games that matter. Right. You're potentially, certainly on the Broncos side, you're going to need that to fend off the Chiefs and to try and keep up with the Chargers, who I think we both agree, and then certainly the odds suggest are even better than Denver. When you look forward, you think about a healthy offensive line, you think about the Mike McDaniel hire as offensive coordinator, what the Chargers project to be. I mean, they project to be the best team in the AFC next year, maybe the best team in the entire NFL. You look on the NFC side, and one of the reasons why, so it was fantastic, I think, for the NFL for Matthew Stafford in an MVP caliber season to get into the NFC Championship game, to be so close, to have that opportunity, sort of a culmination of a great year when the Bears are probably a year away. But the Bears are going to be much better next season, and perhaps like the NFC juggernaut. You were saying the odds on them sliding a little bit. I think that's surprising. Ben Johnson, we did our coaches draft recently. I think if I had the number one pick right now, I would certainly select him. The pieces that they will add, you think about Caleb Williams, you don't have to necessarily agree or disagree with this, but it is interesting that even though he throws the 3 picks and Matthew Stafford is clean in the pick column, that if you buy into QBR in any way, shape, or form, his QBR twice as high as Matthew Stafford's in that game. He doesn't take a sack. And I talked about how the first pick that happened occurred after Odunze should have already caught a touchdown on that drive. Certainly the throw in overtime was unfortunate, but you get a slightly more polished version of Caleb Williams with the physical talents that he brings, which are just as advertised, right? He has lots of problems, but the one thing that was never wrong is the physical talent and that ability to extend plays, not take sacks. You throw in where Colston Loveland is going. You throw in where Luther Burden may be going. You think about what Ben Johnson, there were all types of times this season where Caleb Williams couldn't complete 50% of his passes, and they're still scoring and moving the ball at will. You give Ben Johnson another year with these guys, some additional ability to polish the types of things that he wants, like Mike McDonald was able to do in year 2 with the Seahawks. I mean, the Bears are a year ahead of where so many of these other building teams are. Now, not necessarily a year ahead of where the Patriots, who just arrived right away, but to think about having these young QBs like you were talking about, certainly we'll do a show on the coaching cycle, how enthusiastic and I think encouraging the youth choices were throughout so much of the NFL. The Super Bowl should be awesome, even though the Seahawks do seem, at least on the surface, like pretty significant favorites. But not only should it be a great game with tons of fantastic storylines, which frankly isn't always the case even for a Super Bowl, but next year we can look at and say there are going to be so many things that are even better. 2026 may be one of those all-time great NFL campaigns.
It's going to be fantastic. A lot of what you just talked about, if like you said, we'll talk about coming up. We'll talk about the coaching cycle. We'll talk about obviously our expectations for the different teams when we talk about the futures odds being so flat and those things. I would just throw a quick tease over at the newsletter, bengretch.substack.com. I've been writing about all of these things over the last week or two. I've written like 4 pieces, really extensive stuff on basically the themes of the season. I always like to recap the season with some theme posts. I always quote a line that Shawn added to an article I wrote as a young writer in 2017, where you said that, in fantasy football, drafters always, I can't remember the exact line, but take the main themes from one season into the next year, and it's not always in the correct way. This is why you're a little bit better with words than me. But my favorite part about that quote, in addition to summing up an article that I had written about the trends that had shaped the 2016 season and how they were going to reshape the 2017 season or whatever it was. My favorite part about it was that somebody on Twitter was like, God, this line's great, and like quoted that line. And when they shared it on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It's an amazing line from my article that I didn't write because you had added it to the conclusion. And so I've told that story a million times, but I love talking about those types of themes and concepts. And so, yeah, a lot of, you mentioned, we were talking about it before the show, a lot of the stuff with the odds and the parity and also the youth coaching element has been a really fascinating thing. A ton of under 40 coaches. I wrote a lot about that as I talked about how I think we're heading into an era where scheme is going to be more important than ever. This has been a really fun show. I gotta pin you down on something, because when we did the coaching draft, I took Mike McDonald first. You said he would have been your pick first as well. You just said Ben Johnson would be your first pick. Now, were you not thinking of McDonald, or have you flipped in the last?
I flipped. It may seem weird to flip after the Seahawks have basically been immaculate since we did that draft, but I mean, the Bears just continue to improve. I think people didn't understand how much better they got. They were still anchored to all the lucky wins the Bears got early, didn't understand where they were around playoff time. You see what he was able to do with Caleb Williams, both in terms of developing him and in spite of him. You see the aggressiveness with the way he was coaching, perhaps even to a fault. I think he'll be able to modulate that as he goes forward. And then when he's over there on the sidelines, and when they won their play, he looks like he's ready to murder people, which I don't think you want to be on the wrong side of that either.
Yeah, that's interesting. I may have to reconsider as well. I really like McDonald. Obviously, I just made a strong case for him, but I don't think anything you're saying about Ben Johnson is wrong. I think he is right there as well and belongs right there. As you mentioned, I had said to you the Bears Super Bowl odds slid a little bit when they first opened. The thing I said to you before the show was 16 of the teams were, I believe, 22-1 or shorter, which was crazy. Half the league, 20-1 is usually maybe the 6th or 8th team in the league. It was like 22-1 or shorter. The two teams that have slid from that number, the Bengals have slid the furthest. They're down to 28-1. They're 16th now. The Bears slid to 25-1. I think they opened at 20-1 Getting the Bears at 25-1 to win next year's Super Bowl when there's no clear favorite. No one is better than plus 950, 9.5-1, which I mean, because of this Omni Fantasy thing that we've talked about on the show before, but I don't need to go into right now. I've looked at the futures around this time of year every year for like over a decade. It's never been this flat in that time. I can say pretty confidently. Obviously, you had like the Chiefs almost every year and the Bills and those teams, and the favorites are usually about 5-1. Plus 500. And then you have the second and third teams that are like 7-1 or 8-1. And then, like I said, maybe the sixth or eighth team will be 20-1. But this year we're starting right around 10-1 at the favorites. And halfway down the league, when it opened, you're at about 20-1. Like I said, the Bengals have fallen to closer to 30-1 now. Bears at 25-1. There's still 14 teams that are 20-1 or shorter. You have the Seahawks and Rams at the very top. And then it goes Bills, Eagles, Patriots, Ravens, Chargers, Packers, Lions, Chiefs, and I agree with you. Chargers a good number there at 14-1. Lions, Chiefs, 49ers, Texans, Broncos, Jaguars, all 20-1 or better. Then the Bears and Bengals come in right behind that. It's a mix of the favorites coming into this year, because all the final four teams this year were non-favorites last year. The Rams, Seahawks, Broncos, and Patriots, none of them were like top 10 odds going into the season. I think the Broncos and Rams were like 11th and 13th or something. I was just looking at this recently, and the Seahawks and Patriots, the two Super Bowl teams, were way at the bottom. The Patriots were one of in the bottom quartile. I had a list of the top 24. They weren't even on that list. They were in the bottom 8, and the Seahawks were like 50-1 or something like that. Like very, very low odds. Anyone who placed futures bets on those teams is feeling great. I actually saw a former UW player, Jack Westover. He's a reserve tight end for the Patriots. Apparently his sister placed a $5 bet. They're from the Seattle area. He went to University of Washington on this exact matchup, the Patriots versus the Seahawks, and she made like 5 figures off a $5 bet because it's two huge long shots, her local team and the team that her brother plays for, and she nailed it. Apparently, it's a pretty fascinating story. But going into next year, we have this massive pile of teams that are these underdogs from 2025 who overperformed those long shot odds coming into the year. And then the mix of the teams that were actually expected to be good in 2025 that weren't as good necessarily, right? Like the Eagles and the Bills made the playoffs. They're up there third and fourth in odds here. But you have the Ravens and you have the Chiefs and you have the 49ers we're good, made the playoffs. But the Lions missed the playoffs as well. That's another team in there. A lot of the teams, the Packers were at one point thought to be the Super Bowl odds sort of mid-season, Super Bowl favorites sort of mid-season, and then obviously got into the playoffs as a 7 seed and then lost in the first round, but they're up there 14-1, one of the top odds teams. So you have this mix of, hey, is it the new teams that came up? Is it the old teams? Like the Bengals are one of the, I would say, sort of the old teams. The Bears, one of the new teams that have come up. Both of them have slid a little bit, as we were talking about. Not everyone can have really, really high Super Bowl odds, but there's this thing going into 2026, as you described, that's going to be so fun to talk about, so fun to break down. As you mentioned, the youth hires on both sides. I think the coaching stuff is so fascinating. Wrote a piece over at the newsletter talking about how I think scheme may be more important than ever in the NFL right now, which builds off all the stuff we've talked about over the years about how the last few years, about how defenses are more aggressive and proactive and unregulated in the things they want to do, and how that's forcing the chess match to be more aggressive on the offensive side as well. Very, very fascinating stuff to consider as we go into 2026 and beyond. I love breaking this stuff down with you, and we'll continue to as we go forward. Thanks to all of our listeners for waiting the month or so since we last recorded. But like you said, we'll be back soon with a lot more to discuss.
Yeah, as you talk through that, I would definitely be tempted to get a little money on the Bears, the Broncos, the Jaguars, the Chargers. If
agreed,
I were a betting person, just thinking through it. Those teams seem like they are pretty favorable situations in terms of outlook versus price.
And strongly agree about this idea of the teams that did better in 2025 continuing to be at the forefront of what feels like an evolution. The odds, again, are jamming in the old guard with the new guard. Like the Eagles are a team I kind of want to fade. I mean, they had a hard time adding an offensive coordinator. Their offensive line coach just basically quit yesterday, posted that he's no longer be with the Eagles. Apparently there was when we did the coach draft, I took Nick Sirianni in the late round, and you questioned me on it, and I argued a little bit in favor of the results and like, I just got to be a little humble about the process. And he deserves to be picked because of how good his win-loss record is to that point. I think he's undraftable if we redo it now. I mean, it seems like he's the problem within the building. They couldn't get people to come be his offensive coordinator. Now the longtime 13-year offensive line coach that Jason Kelsey is out publicly saying he's the biggest reason that I had the career that I had, and all of their great offensive linemen think he's the best coach ever. That guy just left the team and didn't seem like he really wanted to, but just didn't really like the situation anymore. There was a report he was the run game coordinator, and late in the year, Sirianni and Patullo started adjusting run concepts and stuff in season without really any input from Stoutland, to the point that Stoutland felt like he didn't want that title anymore because he didn't feel like it actually accurately reflected what was happening. Probably felt like, look, what we're putting on tape is not what I'm coaching or what I want to be coaching. And then he leaves the team at the end of the year. Kind of a fascinating story there. But the Eagles are the kind of team that I'm with you on all the teams you named. I like those picks. I think those are the ones that people should be interested in going after. And other upstarts from 2025, I think the Seahawks are a fine overall favorite at plus 950, and the Rams right there with them. These teams that are at the forefront of where the NFL is going, more so than where the NFL was. That doesn't mean teams like the Chiefs, the Bills, the Lions can't get back there. There's a lot happening in the NFL, a lot of evolution right now. I like those bets in this big mix of names that you mentioned that are more forward-looking than the ones that are that were favorites coming into 2025.
So with that, we will look forward with the rest of you to what should be a fantastic Super Bowl. This is the best time. I think it's the best time of the year to subscribe to Stealing Signals. Ben helping you catch up on so many different things in reality and fantasy football, really establishing the things you need to know to be ready to work through the offseason and decide on some strategies for the 2026 fantasy year. Over at RotoViz, we're about to release the first edition of the rookie guide. Ben, it is not super expensive, and the work the guys have done on that over the last 3 seasons, I made about 20 grand in Dynasty and only really have like those 9 teams. So that's a pretty good return. Can't guarantee that you're going to have exactly that, but whatever it is, the $20 or to that point is going to probably pay for itself.
To that point, we manage a team together, and you're going to get a lot of money off the 9 teams, but you can't guarantee that it's going to be our team.
Our team has been a real black mark on the resume. For everyone else,
I'm hearing this very literally right now, Sean. No, the rookie guide is the best tool in the space. Absolutely, make sure you have access to that.
So, you can tell we enjoy the football. We're excited for Super Bowl, draft season. It's gonna be great. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.